last round of coverage today at SCG in Charlotte for the Modern 20K. I'm Dom Harvey. I'm here with Andrew Ellenbogen, and we are here to see if the 6'2" Mason Clark can go 6-2, get his berth into day two, and finish off this day on a high note here.
It seems almost destined to happen, given the 6-2 comparison. It's hard to imagine him not winning.
You would think so, and honestly, 6-2 is a good record in a Magic tournament. You would. So maybe this is another gift from the. Maybe it's yet another unneeded buff for Mason Clark.
Mm. Yeah, and it seems okay. If this matchup is correct, we're seeing 4-color Omnath against Infect. It looks like.
Okay, so yeah, I have not seen Glistener and friends in quite some time, and be maybe about to see why if Renaissance gets to snipe down this turn on Glistener.
Yeah, I have to imagine that Mason is breathing a sigh of relief to see this matchup. To be honest, Infect is not a deck that's well suited to playing against 4-colors variety of interaction. 0-mana Solitudes, Red and 6 is ping for 1, tons of kill spells at instant and sorcery speed, not to mention the Wraths out of the sideboard, just in case you thought you could save your creature with Finds of Vastwood. I do not like AJ's chances here whatsoever.
Yeah, there seems like an ideal pairing for Mason. As always, though, it is scary playing against the Infect deck. You know that you can lose out of nowhere at any time, and if you line up your removal incorrectly against a trick of some kind, then you could easily throw away a winnable game. So I'm sure Mason will be on high alert, but I think it's a matchup that favors him on the fundamentals. And we're seeing a new one-drop for Infect from Phyrexia All-Be-One in Venerated Rock Priest. So not a card that has the Infect mechanic, just has Toxic One instead. But whenever a spell targets a creature you control, you get to give the opponent a poison counter. So this goes for your own removal, goes for their removal, goes for your own tricks as well. And so in a highly interactive matchup, this can translate to a lot of poison by itself.
And it looks like Mason responded to the Rock Priest with Leyline Binding, allowing picking the fight kind of before he gets a poison for every piece of interaction thrown at the creatures, which I think is a heads-up play by him.
And AJ are really embracing the toxic theme with oil slick lands over in the land section.
It looks like Mason has just picked up a copy of Teferi Time Raveler in his hand, and this is an incredibly effective card against the Infect deck because it completely neuters their ability to fight you on the stack. Once Teferi's in play, if you point a kill spell at a creature, that creature is dead.
Yes, and so Teferi really lets you dictate the pacing of the game. Going to bounce the Glistener Elf, let Mason draw a card. And now AJ is kind of put to the test of, do you try and get more Infect damage up at Mason? Do you feel the need to kind of take time out of your clock to kill Teferi? And now Mason gets the choice on his side of, yeah, we can just Solitude threat, protect the Teferi, and keep that around. Exciting Supreme Verdict as well. So a pretty loud statement from Mason that he wants to have that Teferi still around.
Yeah, I'm pretty surprised by this play, actually. I think if I were Mason, I might have been inclined to just let Teferi die, kind of let AJ refill, and then take out his second wave with the Supreme Verdict. But maybe Mason is figuring, well, AJ's deck doesn't have that many threats. I can probably answer what few threats he plays just with spot removal, and as long as he can't fight me back, I'll be fine.
Yeah, and typically the Infect deck doesn't have a way to grant indestructible to its creatures. That might have changed with the new set, actually, with a Tyvar stand. Another possible trick you can play. Not sure if that one is worth it on balance, and not sure if it's even in AJ's deck here, but maybe a card that's on this radar, I bet.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, certainly as like a protection spell, it's nice that it protects things from Wrath. But on the other hand, the fact that it doesn't give any power and toughness boost makes it seem like a little inferior to something like Blossoming Defenses to me. So I'm a bit skeptical, but I'm far from an Infect expert. What do I know?
So Mason will crack the Follow Strand here in combat. I wonder if this means something like an Iceman battle, or definitely an instant speed trick of some kind.
See, the best instant speed trick of all here would be to cast an instant speed Supreme Verdict, but unfortunately there's only one copy in the main, so that is impossible.
And Glistener Elf already getting turned over, so something being announced here, and it looks like Odawara being channeled, sending the Glistener Elf straight back to the hand, and protecting the Teferi for yet another turn.
Mason has gotten his wish. Teferi is sticking around, making it hard for AJ to find on the stack. But on the other hand, it seems that partially because of the new one drop in Rob Priest, AJ's doing a good job just kind of going wide and overwhelming Mason's interaction.
Yeah, Red and 6 with Odawara is it makes deck, but looks like that isn't in the cards just yet. So Mason is going to cast Expressive Iteration.
If Mason hit Ren and 6 off this, I'm not even sure you'd get back Odawara. You might just want to ping down one of these Glistener Elves.
I think you might have to, yeah.
And I think that's especially true given that Rot Priest only works on spells, not spells and abilities. So if you do go for a ping on their creatures, you will not get a poison counter.
That is a crucial difference, and also means that Leyline Binding, for example, wouldn't trigger the Rot Priest. So this is one of the types of Infect game where you don't really have many tricks or ways to force through your tricks, but you have a bunch of creatures and you just rumble in combat and force the opponent to take the first blow in terms of using their removal.
Yeah. See, one interesting dynamic here is I wonder if AJ is worried about additional Supreme Verdicts because of how quick Mason was to pitch the first one. Like, I wonder if that inclines him to play around first.
Yeah, this is a really interesting conundrum then, because I think against 4-color normally, in the main deck at least, you would not put much weight on the possibility of Supreme Verdict. However, once you see the first one, does that bias you into thinking, well, if they have one, the chance that they have two might be reasonably high, and so you're actually like putting more weight on that possibility now?
Yeah, and I think this verdict play for Mason, which I think was not unreasonable, but it is going to work out kind of maximally poorly into this creature heavy draw. Mason really needed that resource available to him.
And notably, there seems to be black-green Infect with Phyrexian Crusade. Back in the heyday of Solitude and Fury and Prismatic Ending and so on, this is the one thing that seemed to give this strategy any kind of fighting power against those removal-heavy decks. And you would even see decks like, Yorkmoth boarding in for Phyrexian Crusader sometimes, or these decks which had no other Infect sources, just thinking, well, the only way I can get through this wall of removal is to play a card that's vulnerable to none of it. And so having that card actually be on plan is a really nice boon for Infect in this matchup.
That's definitely true, although Mason does have some ways to handle it. Obviously, the one Supreme Rook in the main, additional Supreme Rooks post board, I think Quaddle can block it, which isn't a permanent solution, but can be a good way to kind of buy time while you figure things out. And then the final thing is, I think you actually can also block it with Eternal Witness.
Yes.
So if you do assemble a Witness Ephemerate loop, you can block it kind of eternally.
Well done, well done. Yeah, Dress Down also, I think, relevant. A decent card against Infect in general, as this weird fog of sorts, but specifically against these protection abilities, removing all the abilities can come up as well.
Yeah, very much agreed. And it looks like AJ's prioritizing taking the Teferi off the table rather than rushing the damage at Mason, which is reasonable. Nice to be able to interact on the stack, and also nice to not have to worry about the second bounce kind of incoming.
And we're about to see another draw to playing Infect. Okay, Omnath, sure, you can gain 4. You can gain 4 again. I don't care. That is entirely tangential to what is going on in this game.
That's true, but if AJ is Pump Spell Light, which I think that he is, it's possible Omnath as a blocker is going to be quite impactful in this game. Perhaps not the life gain, but the 4/4 stats that's going to come through.
Yeah, Omnath is mainly relevant as a 4/4 for 4, which I don't know what time-honored limited 23rd pick that would equate to here. You would know that better than I would.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Oh god, I actually don't know if there's a go-to format of 4/4.
So Unearth being cycled here for AJ. So it feels like the shields are down here in the sense of that Crusader can rumble into combat. And if AJ has any +4/+4 pump spell, of which the entire roster is there in the Infect deck, then that might be good enough. But it seems like AJ is just mono creatures all the time here.
I think he might have a mutagenic growth in hand, but that's not enough, right?
So that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And so we will be one short. Although in that case, did we not fire up the Inkmoth Nexus?
maybe he has another pump spell. I'm not sure. That
I
does seem perplexing.
Yeah, I assume this has to be another pump spell. Otherwise, okay, yeah, there we go.
That definitely kills Mason. I'm not totally sure why they want an attack, but it also doesn't really matter. I don't know what outs Mason could possibly have had.
Yeah, wow. So Mason will pack it up here in game one, and it seemed like his draw had the entire recipe you would need in order to defeat Infect, right? Just removal upon removal. We had some card advantage. We had Teferi really cramping AJ's game plan for a while, and yet for Esting Crusader by itself, just really altering the entire terms of that game.
Well, I think Mason may have messed up the game, to be honest. I think pitching the Supreme Verdict to the Solitude was a misstep there. I kind of called it out when it happened. I think it's kind of a lot of resources to commit to protecting Teferi, especially when if you just let them kill Teferi and play another threat, you will like uncounterably destroy all of them. I think Mace was just supposed to conserve his resources and do that. Now, he did get maximally punished by his line because he sort of flooded out following that. But I think it was a mistake.
I think if the Crusader is on your radar, then that's an even stronger argument for holding the verdict and treasuring it at all costs. Without it, I still agree with you. I think that the risk that game was just having to deal with everything individually and not having the cards to do that. And so we kind of pitched the card that cleaned up everything in order to deal with one thing in a window where it felt like that wasn't necessary.
Yes, agreed. And I mean, I try to avoid evoking my solitudes in general, kind of with four color, and I just think this is a case where you kind of need to do that. I mean, this wasn't a Ragavan level threat. You could win this game without Teferi. Teferi's good, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't needed.
I will also say, Mason has a lot of cards that are ineligible here, but this is where that seemingly marginal companion can come up a lot. Just, I need a white card to pitch to my Solitude. This is a white card that I can, unlock on demand. And without that, yeah, you're just throwing cards away into the void naturally. And sometimes that's the most precious white card you have access to.
Yes, and I mean, this is one major reason why most four color players have cut Ice Fang as like one of the cards come from their 80, because that is what enables you to do this. If you don't have Ice Fangs, you get to play the Kira. And I found Kira like surprisingly relevant when I was playing four color. So I do think Mason is really feeling the cost of that here.
That said, now that Elishnorn, Mother of Machines, is in the mix, that is also clashing with Kahira, and so far, basically every four color list that I've seen in recent weeks has opted for Elishnorn instead. So at that point, well, you only need one thing to make yourself ineligible. You can throw the floodgates open and play as many Icefang Cabals and Eternal Witnesses and so on as you like. I think it is kind of an interesting question for these four color lists that have, let's say, the one Elishnorn as the only thing that's clashing with it. Are you meant to play a Kahira in your sideboard so that you have a companion in matchups like Murtide, for example, where Elishnorn is leaving the deck in the first place?
That is a good question, yeah. And I certainly agree everyone is moving towards Elish Norn right now, and I'm not too sure how much of that is kind of a real effect regarding how well positioned the card is in the format. As a 4/7 that's immune to Unholy Heat and kind of immune to some of the commonly played interactions such as Leyline Binding, versus how much this is a new shiny card that everyone's excited about, but everyone's going to be over it in a month. I think the truth is somewhere in between.
It is a flashy card, whether it's shutting down your opponent's deck or massively enhancing all of your own cards, or doing both at the same time. You really feel the rush when you get to do good work with Elishnorn, and then you maybe don't remember or don't post to Twitter the times where you played a 5-mana 4/7 and it did nothing for you.
Yes, exactly. Or even worse, the games where you didn't play it, it rotted in your hand and it did nothing for you.
Or you pitch it to Solitude because, hey, I guess it has good colors, I suppose.
Yes. Certainly being a generic white card is an argument in its favor. In much the same way, is a blue card has been an argument for cards in Legacy Force of Will decks since the beginning of time.
Yes. So Nurturing Peatland as a first land for AJ casting Glistening Elf, perhaps a sign that his hand is land light here?
In some ways, a sign of strength, right? I mean, like, land light, but probably that means he's a lot of spells, a lot of gasoline, not necessarily a weakness.
There is some argument for in a matchup where life total is unlikely to matter, and then also landfall can enable groundswell, for example, but maybe it's not as loud a sign as it might be otherwise.
Mm, yeah. Agreed. Mm. And we'll see how AJ chooses to navigate this. Could just attack for one, take it slow, not rush things. Could try to go for something with protection backup on 2 mana, like get in the first 5 points, even if that's not lethal. Sort of unclear to me what makes the most sense.
Okay, that is Ignoble Hierarch, I want to say.
I believe so, yes.
It is an etch foil, which, as far as I can tell, just means it's a foil which is like less foil and also harder to pass normally.
Yes, agreed, agreed. Mason is just going to use his cantripping fog here to avoid taking the 2 poison. Not an unreasonable choice by him for sure, but also not like some sort of blowout on AJ's
No.
side.
Funnily enough, if you get into these games where you're taking damage from your lands with abandon because it doesn't matter, right? Then if you get into one of these weird games where life total and your poison total are both under threat, then dress down cannot actually save you if it's overkill in both directions.
Yes, agreed.
And so this is a play that often is forced from the Infect side. If your opponent plays Teferi, you have to respond with the thing that protects your creature that the Teferi would bounce. But then if there are several creatures, well, sometimes Teferi just bounces the other one, or they can just take out the Teferi and have it ready to go for next turn. So your hand is forced in that sense. But now AJ does have a window with this card in play to maybe make something happen. And okay, here's Mind of Crozar. So that's 4. And we
Well,
have Vines of Vastwood here as well.
the fairy's in play. Like, you can't protect it. If Mason wants to go for an evoked solitude here, he just gets to do it.
Yeah.
And I love
So
this
I
Mason.
so I guess if AJ sensed weakness, he could have just kicked Vines of Vastwood and played my main phase and then just tried to go for lethal on that turn. As we know it, it would not have worked. And if you're doing that, then you lead on. But turns out he has the ideal follow-up to having your one threat solitude.
Yeah, I like this from AJ, kind of splitting the difference. Like, the play he made is a 2-for-2 with the Solitude, and I think that's kind of the best you can do. You're never going to get them to Solitude a single thing under normal circumstances, I think.
Well, here's the question then: if you're worried about solitude, do you even go for a pump spell there at all, rather than playing Crusader and then the next turn you have the 2 pump spells to get that to 10 by itself?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I could definitely see not going for it, but I also do see some advantages for going for it. It seems close to me.
Yeah,
Um,
we should not ignore the Chalice of the Void on one that shut down. I think that's 4 cards now in 8. But sometimes with Chalice, they just play the cards above there instead and start attacking you with it. So Endurance here just as a green blocker that can actually rumble in combat with Crusader. I like that choice, frankly, and it's going to do that job fine here.
yeah, I
Although
mean,
First Strike versus Infect is not ideal.
right. Like, we have to remember this is a Phyrexian Crusader. It is a bit hard to take down in combat. Endurance will be 2 blocks, a sort of weird life gain spell here. And I mean, 2 blocks isn't nothing. Also making Become Immense quite awkward if AJ is playing that card, which he probably is in some number. Um, but it's not some sort of game changer. There are still 2 major threats in play.
Yeah, Endurance, if it had that 4th point of power, this would be a different story, but as it is, it's just a fog of sorts for Phyrexian Crusader over several turns, and then before anything like pump spells enter the mix.
It seems like we just found a second endurance. So a double block with 2 endurances does actually take down a Phyrexian Crusader, I believe.
It does. Yeah, so Mason is really like radically shifting how his deck operates in one sense there.
And I like the choice to have the endurances. I also like the Chalice of the Voids. Obviously, fighting the second endurance here is not as good as something like a Supreme Verdict in this situation, but still not bad.
They also do pen nicely together because if you're able to shut down pump spells, then the creatures can't really get much bigger, and so a 3/4 is more likely to have relevant stats in combat here. So yeah, we're going to shrink the other endurance to a 1/2. So that Crusader dies, but now the other one can keep chugging along, even if it's going to take a few turns to actually break through in the end.
Yeah, and I wonder if we're going to start seeing AJ throw away spells into the Chalice of the Void to enable a potential Become Immense. Obviously, he has to work his way through these chump blockers first, but at some point, he might want to do that.
And now Mason has this decision of do you start just soaking up attacks from this Crusader now, throwing these endurances in the way, or can you take a hit because, well, that Crusader can't really get big at this point? Or do you play a third endurance and go for the full ambush in combat?
Wait. Okay, wait. I think what just happened is actually somewhat telling. So Mason is shuffling away his own graveyard to kind of get good cards back into his deck. And I think what that implies is that he's boarded out his Eternal Witnesses because you would never make that play if you have Eternal Witness to get things back. You would just choose to endurance nobody or your opponent. So I think we now can confirm Mason's cut that card.
And that makes some amount of sense to me. Yeah. So Mason's strange beatdown plan is actually going to win him this game. It did seem like the first endurance was a stopgap at best against the Crusader, and it really took the second one to lock that side of the game up. So, given that you need to draw two of that specific card, I don't know how reliable that plan is necessarily. But maybe endurance just as a blocker that demands a trick against Plague Stinger or Glistener Elf or something is enough to make it worth it.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is just like doing the double chump block thing on their Crusader while you buy time to find Verdict is a pretty reasonable plan, right? Like you're just like, okay, this will buy me a lot of time. It'll delay things. Maybe you'll overcommit during that time. Then I'll find a Verdict. It will come down uncounterably and be all the more devastating for the delay. And I mean,
I
this
mean,
works.
these endurances are a funnily anemic clock just because all of them have been shrunk. So, it's going to take a few turns to get the job done, but the job has been done. I think we will see game 3 in short order here.
Look at this. He's actually accelerating the clock by bouncing his endurance here. Just turning it into a 3/4 at the low cost of 3 mana and 3 fairy loyalty.
He's the one casting pump spells now.
That is true. In some sense, roles have reversed. Yeah, I honestly do not believe AJ has any outs at this point. I do not think he has a way back into this game.
Yeah, I likely would have conceded a good 5 minutes ago at this point, but that's just because I don't have the mental fortitude to just sit here under these.
Would you say that you lack the warrior spirit, Dom?
I think that's a fair criticism to make. Many have made it of me in the past.
Oh man.
Yeah, my parents, teachers, friends, enemies, the whole gamut, really.
Oh, that's really a lot of consensus from unrelated individuals. It must be valid then, I'll assume. But yeah. So Mason is going to finish off this game here some way. I don't know if it's going to be like a level 3 Omnath trigger, Ren pings. I don't know. I think things are going to end.
What do you think about that white bordered choke in AJ's hand? Not the white borderedness of it necessarily, but just the sideboard.
Yeah, it's not obvious to me that choke is great, just because like, look, Mason's deck is 5 colors, and like I know that all the triumphs are blue and whatnot, but I'm wondering how many lands this typically gets in the average game. I think, and also I think AJ needs to have answers for Chalice in some number, right? And I just don't know that there's room to have like cards like choke, sort of unrelated haymakers, and creatures and pump spells and answers for their Chalice. Like it seems like that's too much to me.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of card which drastically goes down in value once it is a known quantity. And I could see Mason not knowing the card is in AJ's deck or not having it on his radar and just tapping in such a way, not even carelessly tapping, because it makes sense if unless it's exactly choke, but just tapping a triumph because that's what it would make sense to do normally and getting bamboozled by the choke. But does that happen often enough for that to be worth it?
Yeah, good question. Also, it looks like Mason had boarded out some verdicts initially, which I don't understand, to be frank. Like I think Verdict is pretty great in this matchup, honestly. Just not even just to kill multiple threats, but also just as a way to kill one threat, but like no funny business. Like kill their threat, but your pump spells don't work, your vines don't work, there's no way to save it, it's just gone. So I'm pretty surprised that Mason wouldn't want the maximum number. Also, it's one of the few answers to Phyrexian Crusader, like we were talking about.
It even can tag an Amoth Nexus if you have to ferry just for that class. So yeah, I would want as many verdicts as I could get my hands on here. Um,
Yes, I would have max verdicts play or draw in this matchup. I am pretty surprised to see Mason have less. Like seriously, if your opponent just literally plays a Crusader, it's literally just naked in play, and you have verdict and you play verdict and kill a Crusader, aren't you happy? Um,
Now, from AJ's side, we see, I think, a few copies of Force, presumably just as an answer to Chalice, or I guess the one leyline binding if it comes. But is that even an exchange you're that happy with? Because I think a lot of the time you will draw a dead Force Vigor and they're not going to have a Chalice. And then even if you get to Force Vigor the Chalice, well, if you're down a card initially or the rest of your draw isn't cooperating, I don't know if that actually leads to a winning position for you.
yeah, that's fair. Although I do think AJ might be imagining that Mason has the full 4 leyline bindings, which I think is more common these days.
Yeah.
And if they have 4 lane bindings, you might imagine that you'll regularly be able to get like Chalice plus binding or 2 bindings, like something like that. And I think that might be enough to justify the Force Vigors. AJ may not have as many, if he, or maybe not any, if he knew that Mason has just the single binding.
Yeah, I do like we see Thoughtseize and a beautiful signed Lauren Thoughtseize there in AJ's as a proactive answer to Chalice, but also to the Solitude that would threaten your lethal turn or the Supreme Verdict. I think a card like that is much more what I'd like here.
Yeah, very much agreed. I would probably lean on Thoughtseize and say like, you know what? If Mason top decks Chalice in the mid game and I have a bunch of puzzles in my hand, I'm just gonna lose. I accept this.
Loving the comment in the chat that I just want to see Omnath lose. I hate that card, but I like Spike. Phenomenal comment on several levels there. Not least the fact that Omnath is no longer in the deck, which it's not a sacred cow. You can cut it in a matchup like this, where it really does not do anything.
And I think that, to be clear, is a pretty reasonable choice by Mason. Like I could imagine having somewhere around 1 or 2 Omnats. I could also imagine having 0, but I definitely wouldn't have 4. And Mason is going with 0 here, which is totally understandable.
I do love it when Aspiring Spike brews up a cool new deck and it's just for Omnath. That's what makes me such a big fan of him personally.
Oh my god. Yeah. All right. So I assume AJ is going to deploy a threat on 1 and Thoughtseize on 2, since the main cards he's worried about, such as Chalice, Renin 6, etc., are all 2-drops. There's nothing on turn 1 that he's that worried about getting out of Mason's hand.
Yeah, and you delay the Thoughtseize, you give Mason time to draw the card that you might want to Thoughtseize instead. And so yeah, we have a nice curve of turn 1 threat into turn 2 Thoughtseize into, it looks like, turn 3 Phyrexian Crusader.
Kind of just like we drew it up, honestly. I mean, again, I still think this matchup is 4-color favored, but this is the sort of draw from Infect that I think has a shot.
Okay, so there is double Renin 6 and Chalice of the Void. So 3 cards which are conditionally very strong against Infect. I wonder if, like, let's say there was only 1 Ren and there was a Chalice, would there be a case for taking the Ren instead?
I think there would be, although with AJ's specific hand, I think that makes less sense. Because like you don't really care about this Glistener Elf, right? Like you can just lose this Glistener Elf and you can just be all in on Crusader. That's honestly a pretty reasonable plan.
Yeah. So now we have this back and forth of Mason's going to play Ren. I assume we'll try to shoot the Glistener Elf, and then unclear to me if AJ has the Pump Spell yet. Do you save it if you do?
It's like AJ's going with yes, and I mean this is kind of reasonable, right? Because you're sort of trading Mutagenic for Ren in the sense that when you attack the Ren, they have to then minus to like kill your elf. What's weird about it is that, well, you know Mason has a second Ren.
Well, also the Ren is going to 1, and it can still ping the elf next turn. So you're attacking the elf or attacking the Ren. You're not even dealing any poison damage to Mason. Mason will just untap, shoot your Glistener Elf, and so you've got nowhere except that you've burned a mutagenic growth that maybe could have got the Crusader across the finish line.
I'm not sure what just happened there, but it seems like Mason pinged the elf and then Wait.
Yeah, I think verbal confirmation before and just flop the card on the table too soon. But okay, so this is the shield sound moment. Can AJ string together lethal pump spells on this Crusader?
Yeah, I mean the
Well,
world is oyster.
that's a good sign for Mason if AJ is doing this. So there's Rot Priest. And just 2 poison. Okay, so 3 down, 7 more to go. Oh, people saying that Mason wanted to double ping the Crusader, which of course would not be possible.
Yeah, okay, that's very
But
understandable. It's hard to remember exactly which things it does and doesn't have protection from. I don't know. Ren kind of feels like it's mono green, uh, and it's the end of a long day. Totally a reasonable mistake.
now, if that were a legal play, and then AJ has mutagen, that would be true, true blow.
Agreed. Agreed.
I wonder, like, it seems like AJ. So we have the Rot Priest, we have the Crusaders. I don't know what mix of stuff like placing we have as well. We got the Ignoble. How much room is there for actual factual pump spells? Because it seems like we've been in a few spots in these 3 games where AJ had this window and yet just didn't have the scale up plus Mind of Old Crows or something to get it done.
Yeah, well, one thing is, okay, so I haven't played Infect much in Modern recently, but I played Infect a lot in Modern, kind of during its heyday and like Ataxian Probe days, if you will. Um, and what I can tell you from those days is it was normal to cut pump spells against controlling decks like this one, especially Might of Old Crows, a scale up kind of stuff that is like big bursts and not good at protecting your creatures. Like you usually go down on that and focus kind of on like blossoming defenses, sort of thing.
That makes sense too, especially you need room for your Thought Seizers, and I don't know what other side in the mix there. The choke, perhaps. Like this would be a pretty nice spot for a choke, if I do say so myself.
Yes, agreed. So I think there's probably just like less of that in general post board. Probably some. Like I think we did see a post board scale up, but like usually the first one to go is Might of Old Kroza because it's kind of a sorcery. Uh, and I wouldn't be shocked if AJ has none of that card in his deck.
Mm-hmm. And we saw, was that Snakeskin Veil protecting the Rot Priest before?
I think so. Yeah. So maybe that's better blossoming defenses. It's certainly better sometimes. It's weirder. It kind of works better on a creature with Infect, right? On the Rot Priest, I mean, you'll still do it and all, but the +1 counter isn't getting you much.
Yeah, I assume this would be a great spot for Supreme Verdict if that was an option for. Okay, so we are now in this weird holding pattern of Ren with Odawara as a loop that does contain the Crusader, but also gobbles up all of Mason's mana in the process. And so, yet again, Shield's kind of down. And I think this is the choke maybe makes more sense to me as a proactive answer to Supreme Verdict, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Maybe I'm too harsh on the choke. Maybe it does have its moments. Hmm.
Okay, so 6 poison. And then,
One thing AJ has to. Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
One thing AJ has to be aware of here is the fact that this Ren is almost at ultimate loyalty. Right? Like, if Mason just keeps doing this loop for a while, maybe his plan is, okay, iterate the loop one more time, get Ren to 7, you attack me because you're pushing Infect, then I ult this Ren, then I'm going to just, like, flashback removal spells and the cows come home and take over the game. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I don't know what other removal spells there are. I think there isn't, but let's say Mason found, I guess Supreme Verdict probably ends the game on the first casting regardless. But yeah, you ideally don't want to let the game get to that point. Otherwise, though, there's really no difference between the Ren being at less than 7 or being at any other point in that spectrum as long as it's alive. So yeah, so same loop again. I assume AJ will crack. Oh no, doesn't crack. Maybe cracks Peatland. Okay, cracks Peatland. Sure, sure.
It's sort of interesting. I kind of wondered if AJ was going to crack Peatland if he would have done so main phase to try to, like, draw a pump spell for that shields down moment. But it seems
Yeah,
that maybe he wanted to represent interaction or something to that effect.
and so okay, AJ making a statement here. I want to get you to more poison more than I want to kill the Ren. Um, And Igmoth Nexus is a nice kind of a threat that could conceivably win even through like a iteration into verdict or something. But again, that requires a pump spell to do that, and those seem to be in pretty short supply.
Yes.
And yeah, but so Nexus is going to get Besaju'd, and now let's say Mason doesn't draw anything else relevant. I'm keen to see if he tries to alt Ren and then iteration into something, or just continues in this pattern of looping Odawara. Because if you do that for one more turn, you can alt Ren and then still have the threat of looping Odawara later, but then that might be too late at that stage.
Yeah, it's definitely close. I would err on the side of ulting the Ren, just because like if you can like iteration to a land, iteration to another land, like you can kind of it can take you multiple iterations and still be okay. But maybe that's wrong. Maybe Guaranteed Odawara is better, especially if you can like pair it with some sort of play. I'm not sure.
There is other stuff Mason could find to survive the turn. So Dress Down, for example, or was this Verdict? No, it's just okay. Odawara. Second verse, same as the first. So we're pinging this. All right. And now we're pinging the Rot Priest again.
Right? So that's not enough damage.
Yeah, because that's a 2/3. So
Oh no. I think Mason just forgot about the whole swing counter there. It has been incredibly relevant. Maybe he thought that the creature was only a 1/1 base. I'm not sure, but it's
well
going to cost
now,
him.
okay, so Become Immense can go for lethal. And yeah, that's gonna do it. So AJ Smigilski in a crazy 3-game set there takes the win out from underneath Mason Clark, who's been officially demoted to 5'3", not the high B, let me tell you. And AJ will be moving on with the Infect deck into day 2 of competition here.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Yeah, like that plus one counter that I said was so irrelevant, really coming up there for the regular damage kill via Become Immense.
I, I do wonder if AJ didn't draw the pump spell, do you finish off the Ren with the Rot Priest to kind of unlock or to take down the Ren plus Odawara loop?
I think you do, yeah. That's what I would have done at least.
Yeah. So it seemed like that game. So what happens if Mason doesn't do that, right? So it picks up Odawara and then is the Become Immense just lethal regardless, or
Well,
yeah, I
I think
think
I would alt Ren, to be honest. I think I would risk it. I think I would alt Ren, go for the iteration, and go from there.